There we go. Well, welcome everybody. I'm happy to welcome you to our program. We're still getting people coming in. Brainstorming our human connection. And really, indeed, I think we're really feeling a connection to the events around the world, and particularly in the Ukraine now. And today we are fortunate to have someone who's directly connected with events there, so we can get some other perspective, and you will find that this particular perspective I think will deepen your understanding and connection with what is happening there. And I think just as important, it's a reminder that we're kind of, very much all in this together, how much we are connected. I would like, if there's an objective or something that could be obtained from this meeting, I would hope that we would feel some closer connection to not only what's happening in the Ukraine, but also how we are all connected around the whole world. There's things that happen here that makes a difference in other places, and many things that happen in other places that really do have an impact on our lives. So we can't say, well, that's got nothing to do with me. It's halfway around the world. Well, it's a lot smaller now. So I'm hoping that we will gain something from that. Today, our guest is Alla Kureninova. And welcome, Alla. How are you today?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Good. Well, I always like to start these things off, Alla, with trying to just know a little bit more about the person who is our guest. You will get to know some of our other cast of characters and co-conspirators as this program goes on. But I would like to start off with an elevator speech, the Alla elevator speech of like, well, who are you? And what are you doing now? Your family, just so we have a kind of, short introduction. So you're not just an avatar on the screen.
Sounds good. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I am from Ukraine. I moved to Sioux Falls 10 years ago. And I missed the time when I would say I'm from Ukraine and people would, best case scenario, pretend they know where it's at. So I would say it's just little country in Eastern Europe, and we'll just leave it at that. And I feel like now you say I'm from Ukraine and people have questions, and you can see concern on their face, and that's great. And I found it to be very therapeutic for myself, if nobody else, to tell them what is it I know and how it's affecting me right here in Sioux Falls. So 10 years ago, like I said, I moved to Sioux Falls, and it is just me here and my own little family, my husband and my kiddo. Everyone else, my entire family, is back in Ukraine. Never really wanted to move here, and that was fine because they would come over and visit, until almost 2 months ago, I got that call when they said the war started. And at that point, I obviously wish they were here by then, but it's my dad, my mother, 2 sisters, and they both have their young families there too.
Can you tell me a little bit about, other than your initial impact, and that's a thing too, so of course we'd like to hear about that, but can you tell me about how your life changed being in Sioux Falls? You're not over there, you're in Sioux Falls, but I'm going to guess your life changed. And can you talk to us a bit about that?
Absolutely. So on that February 24th is when I got a phone call, and I woke up to a lot of messages and pictures even by then, because it was almost noon in Ukraine by the time I woke up at 4 a.m. So right away, right then and there, worried, helpless, because you don't know what to do. Nobody has instructions. And what do you do when your family calls and they say they're now in the middle of a war zone? But at the same time, I knew that I have to find a way pretty quick, find a way to just get back to work, right? And continue going. And I found that going back to work and keeping the same routine is the only thing that kept me sane. Otherwise, just knowing you can't do anything just puts you in the loop of constantly checking news and worrying more, and almost making your family more nervous too. So I had to get back to work. I went to work the same day, and that feeling that I got at work was interesting and very transforming for me. So as I walk in the office, 1,000 things go through my head. I'm checking my phone all the time, making sure I'm getting connection from my parents and my sisters. And where I thought I'm at, I thought nobody knows. Nobody really cares because they're not from there. It's just halfway across the world. So those first few hours, I felt really lonely. I thought that I'm gonna have to come out here to work every day and just pretend everything's fine and deal with my own issues later. It was until some of the first people just walked in my office, sat down, and they couldn't even say anything right away. They just wanted to see, how am I? And that was their question. How are you? Because that question had so much behind it, right? Because at that point, they know what's going on in Ukraine. They know my family is there. And that connection that I was able to create that very first day was huge, because then you're not doing this by yourself. My coworkers had my back. They knew that I'm gonna need a minute here and there. So that was my first few days. And after the first few days, I heard something from, again, one of my coworkers that changed the trajectory of how this is affecting me right now. One of my coworkers said that if it wasn't for knowing somebody from Ukraine, like they know myself, they would not even forget to watch the news about Ukraine, but maybe even on purpose not watch the news because it's stressful. Everyone has their own stress in their life. Why would they add on to it? And that hurt, because that just means that everyone's going to stop watching the news. They're going to stop caring, and that war is going to go on for years if nobody gets involved and if people don't know what is truly going on. So from there, I knew I have to bring my story out to more people and make it as personable for as many people as I can. So that's still a mission I'm on today. And I was hoping that it was going to be over the first week, and I was hoping it'll be over the second week, and that I could switch more to a fundraising and helping that way that I know. And the fact that it's still not over just means we have to find ways to connect to people back there still, and find very creative ways to help. Because I can tell you that I went through just being angry and hoping that I can just yank my parents and my sisters out of there and have them close by. And then to speaking about, let's close the airspace, let's get the troops on the ground, to just a place where I'm in this country and other countries are looking to help and our country is looking to help. But I also had to understand that it has to be done in a way that doesn't put other nations in danger. So imagine having your family here in Ukraine and you just want to make like a bubble around them, right? Make something happen that'll protect them right away. But you also have your own family and your own little kid in this other country that has the power to make a difference, but they're gonna risk everyone's lives here. So now I'm talking more about let's understand what's going on here and let's help where we can without putting more people in danger.
While we're carrying on this conversation, I want to remind our co-conspirators that this is a co-conspiracy. So I'm hoping that you will have some questions, and so we can get to some of the things that you're interested in, and question that you have, because I think it not only will provide you some answers, but it also will give Alla a chance to know what's on your mind and how you're thinking about this. If for no other reason than it will allow her to adjust to some degree her messaging, that's always important. That feedback is important for the kinds of work that she is doing. So you mentioned before that you get this call from your parents and your family there and saying that they're now in the middle of a war zone. Can you give us some kind of idea of what that was like? What kind of things did they describe?
So it was interestingly very gradual, right? At first, they were saying that they woke up to explosions. Within probably 30 minutes after that, my parents already saw tanks going through their streets because they're that close to the Russian border. And it's interesting how in the worst of the situation, human mind still cannot grasp it. My mom and my dad has military experience. The simple fact that he couldn't tell whether those are Ukrainian tanks or Russian tanks, his brain and his heart could only think it's Ukrainian troops coming through. But from where they were going from and where they were going to, he had to come to terms that those are Russian troops. And there at all this time, it still wasn't even an hour since the first explosions on the border. There was no information coming from Ukrainian government saying, this is a war, this is what you do. There's step 1, 2, and 3. So some people were running out and getting stuff at the store because they knew it's gonna be hard to get out or things are just gonna get scarce. Some people packed their cars and a little bit of their stuff and just left, just assuming the worst. My parents just kind of stayed put, and they still could not believe that this could be a war. So for a few hours there, they just thought this is some kind of show of power, and they're just going to put these tanks out there and maybe negotiate some more under pretense that now everyone knows they're not kidding. And then my sisters live in a bigger town about another 40 minutes west of my parents. So by the time the tanks got there, say another hour, they were met by Ukrainian army there because the city was big enough, they wanted to protect it. And when that first fire broke out and my sisters messaged me that they can hear gunfire, they're seeing just people with guns, that's the best way you can describe it. You don't even know what to call them. What side are they on? Running and fighting and shooting at other people. That I think is where it really sunk in for me and for them. And at that point, it was too late to go anywhere if you were even trying to run away. That's how fast it'll happen. Within a few hours, they knew this is real.
So how did your family in particular, how did they react, and the people around them? You said they stayed there. Do you know what their rationale was for staying? Other people left. They stayed.
So less people left than stayed. Some people took off pretty quick, but a lot of people stayed. And to this day, I still don't know how people find it within them to stay. In the beginning, everyone just thought this is 48 hours. There's no reason to leave your home if they're going to only fight for these maybe critical points, and that's it. So a lot of people stayed thinking that it's going to be over before they can even get anywhere. But then there's people still staying till this day. We're almost 2 months into it, including my parents are still staying in their village. And what my mom is thinking is and saying is it is her home. She does not want to leave. She is saying that at her age, it just, she just tells me I don't understand that this is where she grew up. This is where she lived for many, many years. And she really does not know how to start over. So she thinks if there is end of life, in her opinion, that's starting over. That is going to be so bad for her that she'd rather stay where she's at.
Yeah, it does create a kind of a real dilemma, because especially if you're in a small village and that's what you know is your life, leaving there is like jumping off into an abyss. You have no idea of what to expect. That could be a big problem for everyone. I want to invite other people now to join in if there are other questions. We have a lot more things to cover, but I don't want to get too deep before other people have questions. Anyone else have a question or comment?
I'd just like to ask Alla, to be clear, first of all, I watch everything having to do with Ukraine, but I'm a semi-retired newsman, and I think a lot of people do. I mean, I hope so. Do I understand that your sisters and their families are still there, or did they make it over here?
So my sisters and their little kids are in Moldova now. So they made a trip all the way west from the eastern border, all the way west to Moldova, and their husbands are still in Ukraine because anyone between the ages of 18 and 60 cannot leave the country.
And as citizens of South Dakota and any other state, what do you hope that we do individually? I mean, I think we have an idea what the nation can do, but what can we do as individuals from your standpoint?
I think it's just being involved and staying up to date on where that conflict is at. Needs change. In the beginning, there was a big need to fundraise. And then as that war got kind of swallowed some cities and destroyed ways to get into those cities, the help, the financial help wasn't helpful anymore because the humanitarian help was just not able to get to those cities. And I am hoping that we're also getting to a point where some refugees would be able to enter United States and that South Dakotans can open their homes for them. And I have heard from a lot of them just saying, where do I sign up? Where do I put my name down? So needs change throughout, so keep up to date on it.
Anyone else? Anyone? Okay, so we'll go forward. Anyone else have other questions? Just kind of make a note to yourself, and we'll come back to that. As you said, Alla, things are changing, and some things change rapidly, others less so. What are the changes that you think are most profound right now? The things that just really change the way you think about what you can do?
I would say most recently, you have hopefully heard the good news that Ukrainian army is pushing Russian army back and getting them out of some of the cities and opening up humanitarian corridors to cities that have been torn by Russian aggression for weeks. So that is definitely good news. It is also opening up opportunities to get some of the humanitarian help in. Humanitarian help has been sent to Ukraine for weeks now by all countries of the world. So the help is there. It's just finally there's ways to get it there. With this, liberating these cities and towns also opens up, and you've probably seen that on the news, is the atrocities that have been happening in those villages and towns and homes while they were under Russian control.
Mhm.
So that is definitely changing the picture of the war, and that it is not just we want the land or we're taking over the land where people want to be a part of Russia. It is something else.
So, as you mentioned, there's a lot of destruction of property, and of course, destruction of people too, and destruction of lives. So I'll start with the property, not because that's the most important thing, but I think it's easier to visualize. How do people, what's the idea of rebuilding, or how do people think about rebuilding towns and cities and infrastructure, just of the stuff we can see on the news? And I have to believe that there's a lot more than that. What's the, I guess I'm looking for what is the feeling, or how does one even imagine going forward? How do you rebuild that?
That's definitely something that, watching all these cities that have been there for hundreds and thousands of years, just destroyed to the ground. You said that yourself, it's just property, right? And it seems like it can be replaced. But for so many cities and for so many people, that's history, that's culture. And they do see it as an attack on their culture and on their beliefs, because those were, like I said, 1,000-year-old churches and university buildings. And that seems like the least of the problem, right?
Mm.
But it is definitely, it hurts just as much. And I cannot even imagine how long it's going to take just to physically rebuild it.
And of course, some things, it seems like, how do you rebuild the things that actually, even if you were to somehow historically change them, that's not the original thing. It doesn't have that same spirit that it had from the thousands of years, even though it has gradually been replaced as people repair it. That's a lot different than saying, oh, we rebuilt this as we thought it was. We didn't have the plans or something like that. So I'm curious if Ukrainians, maybe it's hard to say, but I'll ask you a question anyway. If they're thinking about what they would want to replace, do they want to go back and replace that? Or, as you say, it's important to them. How are they thinking about that?
So that's probably one of the things that a lot of Ukrainians would want to talk about. They don't want to talk about what they're going through right now. They just all want to talk and imagine how they're going to come back and rebuild. Nobody has any concrete plans. Like you said, it's hard to say, what are we going to do? But as soon as they're able, and that's an example that I've seen in my little parents' village, and I've seen in Kharkiv, that's at this point is wiped almost to the ground. As soon as there is any kind of peace and quiet on the streets, people go out there with their brooms and start picking up rubble of homes, which seems like that's not making any difference, but that's how people there are under the circumstances.
So in your case, I'm going to think that other Ukrainians in the United States. Are Ukrainians in the United States, are they networked, and are you thinking about how you would go about collectively working for getting Ukraine back on its feet?
It's interesting. I obviously know a lot of Ukrainians in the United States, whether it's my college friends or somebody that eventually made it over to US and we connected again. But I also know a lot of Ukrainians right here in Sioux Falls. You might be surprised, but right in within this area, we estimate about 2 to about 4,000 Ukrainians live here.
Yeah,
But it's,
people are often surprised when they learn that I'm Ukrainian.
yeah, yeah. But the thing is that they did not have a big group or a network already created. So it was something that is a part of what I'm trying to do is get them all together. It's been harder than I thought. I thought as soon as I'll say, let's get together, talk about the hardships, the war, and how your families are there, that people would jump on that opportunity, but they don't. It looks like through our culture, a lot of them just want to connect in person and not in a bigger group. So we have been having conversations and trying to find out what is maybe a few trusted resources that we can direct donations to.
And are there things other than donations? Because as we mentioned before, yeah, sure, money, property, those kind of things, they're there, there are things, but underneath that, there are people. So are there other things that, even if they're not doing it, you see that might be useful in terms of like, support within the, Ukrainian community?
So I'll bring up a few things that are already out there that people don't even think about. Little things like Verizon is allowing you to call Ukraine for free. So those are things that are allowing me to connect with my parents when they don't have internet, but they have any kind of cell service. I'm able to get through and call them and not worry about what my bill is going to look like. There's also, in my own example, it took me a little bit to get there, but I got there now, that we have to live fuller lives and not be afraid to share it with our friends in Ukraine, because they want to see the sunny, smiling pictures. They see the pictures of the war outside their window, right? And a lot on social media. So I felt like I didn't want to send pictures of my little kid and maybe a dog or something playing to my parents, because it just seemed like, really, is this really important right now? But this is what they're looking forward to. And then even posting my own thoughts online, and the fact that I'm sharing the story with the Sioux Falls community has brought so much feedback back from my friends in Ukraine, saying, oh, wow, this is awesome that you're going out there and talking about it. And in their messages, you see that they're saying, at least people will know. And I'm like, oh my God, you have no idea. Everyone knows. But to them in Ukraine, they don't know that. They think if everyone knows, they're going to stop it. So showing them that we know, we're talking about it. If you want me to communicate something in English, please let me know. So some of that support is very important.
Well, just like we were talking about the inner feelings and how we support people who are in the United States who have some feeling, I'm just wondering about helping the people who are in Ukraine rebuild. You mentioned that, look, the buildings are the buildings, and they mean, there's the material part of the building, but there's also the historical, cultural, and therefore human part of the building. The buildings are not just stones stacked on top of each other. They have meaning to people. So I, in my limited imagination, can't imagine how you rebuild a person's personal history in that way. But what kinds of things are people doing? I mean, or what kind of thoughts, discussions are people having about, like, well, if we don't have that church, how do we, not materially, but what do we emotionally put in its place? How, I'm looking for the emotional rebuilding. Maybe that's what I'm trying to
Mhm.
ask.
I can almost tell you that emotionally, Ukrainians are there. They're saying that they are amazed by themselves and their neighbors, just how much they have came together already. So I feel like before it seemed like we need a church to get together. And now they're seeing we don't. We just need each other and we just all need to survive. And then we'll go in the street and meet, and we'll go to somebody's house, that same house where we sat in the basement for 3 days together. They're seeing that, yes, it's sad for them to lose those pieces of history, but they're also seeing that it's just people. They're at this point where they're just saying, it doesn't matter. As long as all of us survive, all the people I know survive, that we can all be, we're together already. We're in this already.
What are ways that people are learning to do that? I mean, you mentioned that they are, but can you give us any kind of stories of how that's coming to be?
Mhm. I would probably even say, with my parents' example, my mom, yeah, she had neighbors she knew, and they would say hi to each other. But there is a different kind of relationship there now. The fact that they would stop in and they'll just drop off eggs or whatever other extra things that they might have, and she'll share what she has without ever thinking that I'm giving it to you because of this or for this much money or anything at all. There's just no thought of any material things anymore. So that's one example. And then I would say from there, so we're seeing big numbers, right, of Ukrainians already in other countries. We see that. What we don't see is the amount of people that escaped the immediate danger and stayed within Ukraine, but just further west. And Ukraine, there's tourism in certain cities, but definitely not across the whole country. And the country is very agricultural. So you're talking people left Eastern Ukraine, or some did, and they just, on their way west, had to find places to settle in. And those places are somebody else's homes. So people open their homes to others just because they could connect on that struggle, and knowing that, yes, come on in, let's live together where it's safer, but also knowing that at this point, we don't know, it might get dangerous here too, and we'll hold hands and we'll move on further west. And just seeing how people are open to that is pretty amazing.
It sounds like that with all of the destruction and misery, that actually Ukraine is in real time becoming a different country because of this, in terms of their connectedness to each other.
I agree. I feel like the Ukraine that I know, that I grew up in, very young country. It's only been independent for 30 years. And out of those 30, 10 of them, I lived in the United States. So I haven't seen, or the Ukraine that I have seen, had a lot of corruption. And it did seem, and I don't want to, talk bad about my own native country in a time like this, but it did seem like everyone was for themselves because the life was hard. And that's what people do, is they just try to take care of their homes and their families as much as they can before they give outwards. And to see the connections that are built right now, and people realizing that, look what we can do together. Who thought that a country this small, if anyone on the call have not seen the map, please do. Little tiny Ukraine, the size of Texas, and Russia that takes half of the continent, right? And you're talking Ukrainians didn't just hold them back or slow down Russian army. They're now pushing them out of the country. And that happened with Ukrainian army that was trained, but also people that just volunteered. They put on hard hats from construction and they went out there to fight. So that is not going to go unnoticed, and it's not just going to go away. I do think that Ukraine is going to be a different country on the other end of it, and a better country and better nation.
Well, it seems like you will certainly have stories that connect you in ways that before that you had like a flag and you know, lots of different like villages, or you know, like people had their own, you know, let's say 150 people that they knew. But now you have, just by the movement, you have created new, maybe even new families, probably, you know, like people who lost somebody, they're in another village. And so now that those people take them in, and, you know, voila, you have people who didn't know each other, but now they're family, you know. Have you seen any kind of things like that or heard of it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I have a friend that just recently escaped Mariupol. If you heard, that town was just terrorized and still is for weeks. She was able to escape with her mother-in-law and her son. And they have found refuge just 150 miles away from that city, with a family that already had kind of tight quarters. But the fact that they are together now and they're sharing anything from meals to the struggles that these people are going through is amazing to watch. You see the pictures and they are like one family. They're celebrating birthdays. They're signing up her child into the same activities that their children have been signed up for weeks. They have to show them the school. They are one family. And that's amazing. And I think those people, in this particular example, the three of them leaving Mariupol and seeing what they've seen, they need that family to recover in whatever best way they can.
Sure, sure. How about the people who are leaving Ukraine for countries close to Ukraine and the borders of Ukraine? What have you heard about their stories?
There's, as well, like with anything else, there's multiple stories out there. These are people, you know, fleeing to find better life for themselves, for their kids. But there's two mindsets. Some are finding these better lives forever. They're just saying, okay, now I'm going to live here in Europe. And some people maybe always wanted to, and they're finding where they want to relocate to in Europe. And there are some people that are just forced to get across the border so they can get out of the war, and they cannot wait to go back. And I'll tell you, my sisters, I have two sisters, about the same age as I am, with two little kids. So they're now in Moldova, because where they were at one point, there was no heat, no electricity, no water, no way to get any supplies for their children. So they had to leave, and they're now in Moldova. I feel like every time I talk to them, all they keep saying is that it's just another week and we're going to be able to go home. So they cannot wait to go home. And conversations that we're having about them maybe coming here are only about, well, if it is easy and we're able to come just to visit, just to be together while we're waiting for the war to end and we're going to go back. So there's different mindsets of people that are leaving. But I am very nervous that if this war lasts and lasts for months, or what if it, even if it's a year, a lot of those people are going to get so settled in their new homes that it's going to be hard and a lot to ask of them to come back. And you have that kind of that suck the minds right out of and the talents out of Ukraine. And Ukraine's going to need every one of them back. But you can expect people to now build a new home somewhere else and now make a decision to leave and come back.
I think it takes a lot to stay out of your country, look at it on TV as completely devastated, have children and say, okay, well, let's go back now. You know, that can be pretty tricky on the mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said definitely. It is,
Yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah. I'm going to open it up again to our esteemed panel. Do you guys have any questions, comments?
I just thought it was interesting to hear you explain how it has changed viewpoints of how we live when all of our items and needs and wants being taken away from us, and how important human beings are to each other. That really brings up a issue that this small country can influence the world in such a manner. It has to be a grateful feeling. That's a little selfish, but I really truly believe I'm looking at what humanity needs. Not a war, but if it takes a war, sometimes better things come out of it. And I think that has really shown true, and you have brought that to our attention. I just want to say hats off for sharing this with us and sending our prayers and thoughts with you people. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's definitely one of the points I speak on when I speak, especially when you speak to high school kids. I don't want to share too much of the war and the direct struggles there. I tell them the lessons that we should learn, and that helps me. Like you said, maybe this is not the right word, but it helps you justify what is happening, and that hopefully it doesn't happen for no reason. And you have to take lessons out of it, or you're going to think that all these lives and all this time is just wasted. And I think it's enjoying the little things, appreciating the little things, reconnecting with people on a human level and not material, because those things can go away or be taken away.
Thank you, Lee. Anyone else have something that came to mind during this discussion? Kevin?
Yes, I'm wondering, we talk about American exceptionalism, we talk about American spirit. I think all of us who have eyes to see and ears to hear have been inspired by the courage of the Ukrainian people, and also so impressed by President Zelensky. I just wondered, did you expect this kind of courage and leadership out of him? And what does he and the way he has handled this mean to the fight that the Ukrainian people, not just the army, but the people have put up against a much larger foe?
Very good point, because I think throughout the history, we had some really good leadership, but we had some really bad leadership too, where it seemed like a good idea at first and people fought for that person to be in power just for them to turn around and make bad decisions, or again, be swallowed by corruption. And then people would have to elect and again fight for somebody else. So the fact that this kind of president, this kind of human is in charge right now, Ukraine is very lucky and they know it. I don't think anyone expected something like this from him. He, again, just like anyone in power, right, seemed like he was making the right decisions and the wrong decisions. So we really didn't know which way this is going to go. But I do think that him just staying in Ukraine, fighting for Ukraine, but also sending messages of support and showing up on the streets and in the hospitals, that keeps, like you said, not just the army, but the people strong. And I was worried, and I still am, that what is going to happen if he is taken out, or the way he does put himself in danger, that he dies, through this war. What is that going to mean for people in Ukraine? Because he has been such an image. What if you take that image away? That's what I'm worried about.
It seems that other people are following in his footsteps too. It seems like he's inspired other leaders
Mhm.
in Ukraine and given them something of a different image to look up to. Have you seen the same thing, or is that just media hype?
I've definitely seen it, that it spread from there all the way down into every small town and village. Mayors of every city are following in the same footsteps. They're taking care of their people. They're communicating to the country and the world what is really going on. Those are going to be people in Ukrainian history forever. Everyone has put their own little spin on it. There's one of the mayors that posts kind of funny videos anytime he does talk about what happened in the day. So there's interesting how those characters still have a place during the war, and they have an image that everyone follows, and they have the courage to stay and fight for their people. And with that comes the sad. There's a lot of mayors, because they had strong positions and stood up for their towns. Some of them have been taken by Russian army and are held hostage. Some of them died. Like, there's stories, especially from around Kiev, that's the people they targeted right away, because they knew that those are the leaders that, if anyone helps this town survive, those are those leaders. So they went in and took them out. So that's sad.
Anyone else have questions, comments? Anybody else? Well, I will continue then, but you continue to think of any comments that you have. We can find a lot of people, as you said earlier, that we don't really, we get really excited at first, and then we kind of drop out, we tune out. Do you have an idea of, other than, speaking on programs like this one, what are some of the other things that you're doing now to keep people involved? And what are the kinds of things that we can do to stay involved, or to keep that light on?
Mm-hmm. I was impressed by how many groups and organizations have showed interest to talk to me or have me put them in contact with other Ukrainians. Anything from a radio show to our local Kellerland news, but also smaller groups like churches and Kiwanis Club, for example. And that has been huge for me, because you're reaching into these smaller pockets, smaller groups, and you're making it personal for them. You're connecting with them on a level that I'm able to say, we're talking about Ukrainian nation, and I know you care, but I know they would care more if I also tell them a story of a mom, and then a lot of people can connect to that. Or, like you said, somebody losing a church and losing a place to get together. There's different nationalities in Ukraine. There's different cultural beliefs. So finding what you can find for people to connect to Ukraine better has been what I've been doing in the area here.
With the people who are Ukrainian but living in the US, and you mentioned some of them get together and others don't. But do you find those kinds of lines also, let's say they haven't connected in the same way those people who have a mutual war experience in the country, they may change their whole thinking, feeling about those people that they didn't talk to too much, those other people over there, they speak funny Ukrainian or whatever, or whatever. But then the people here, they, like when they come here, what my experience is those people often, even that they know, okay, we're Ukraine and we have something more in common than the people that are around us, but often they still, they still don't quite get together. Do you find that they are reconsidering that or crossing any lines as they are in Ukraine, or they still have the lines?
I am surprised by how much Ukrainians are still keeping to themselves. And I think that's another part of what I've been reaching out to my Ukrainian friends here and just saying, have you seen how many people care? Like how many people would just show up for us? So they understand it is their hurt, but it is okay to tell others about it, and they will try and understand. They'll do their best to understand. I also see other lines blurring though, the ones where everyone thinks that Sioux Falls and South Dakota is this Midwestern state that does not accept immigrants. That's what I have always been told, that moving to South Dakota was not a good decision because it's going to be hard to be an immigrant here. And if there was any of those lines there before, they're definitely blurred now or even erased. People like me are able to see just how much other people care and how much they're wanting to help and how much they're interested about your story and where you came from and what are you doing here, and they're going to help and they're going to support. So seeing something like that come together is huge too.
Have you found with your new immigrant story and your reconsideration, have you found pathways to other immigrant communities other than the Ukrainian or Eastern European ones? Have you found new, let's say, pathways for conversations between, let's say, the people from South America or the people from Ethiopia? Have you found any change there, or have you experienced that?
Through working with Voices for Peace and Multicultural Center, I've definitely met other people from other communities, cultural communities, that can really, really relate. Because when you think about it, yes, there's a lot of immigrants in the United States that moved here for economical reasons, just better jobs, better standard of living. But a lot of the immigrants here are escaping a similar situation in their country. So those connections have really been meaningful, and finding out that it is not just this community that's going to understand themselves. It is the entire immigrant community that has gone through something similar and just even gone through leaving their home. Even if it wasn't for a war or fear of persecution, it was still leaving their country, and the effects that has on your mindset, settling in a new place.
One of the things I found in immigrant communities is that many of them have left their countries when it hasn't been, let's say, for just escaping a war. Many of them have left their countries still looking back. And even the ones who escaped because of war, it was just for fear of their lives. They never really gave up on that. Mm-hmm. And then there are people who leave because they think, well, I don't know what these people are thinking. I just don't really fit here. I want to get the heck out of here because they're too square or something, So have you found those people maybe getting together or reconsidering, or are they just sort of like saying, well, that Alla, I don't know what she's doing. She got into the wrong kind of mushrooms or something. She's
if I be honest, I did meet some people that have immigrated to the United States that have said exactly that. They said, we we saw it coming, or we felt it coming, or we knew there's going to be some kind of unease in that country or in my country eventually. So they're pretty much saying, yep, I moved here for a reason, didn't I? So they almost like it validates their decision, whether they made it a year ago or 30 years ago, but in a way they're very content. And maybe I wish I had that mindset, because they're not as nervous and as worried about what is going on there as I am. I constantly feel like if I could just go and do something, change something with my presence there, I would have. But yes, there's those people too.
That they don't feel like it's their fight.
It's just not their problem.
Yeah. Is that, do you feel sometimes, because sometimes people feel something different than they are able to say. Do you ever get the feeling like, okay, as you say, that it's a rationalization, but in their heart of hearts, they really think, oh man, I really wish it could be different.
Right. That's a really interesting point of view, definitely. I bet with all the different information that's out there, maybe some of the people just don't want to take the wrong side, right? There is the other side of information out there, especially if you go out and look for it, that'll tell you that there is some kind of justification for the war. And maybe they just don't want to pick a side right now.
It can be really difficult. It must be complicated, at least, to try to figure out not so much whether the war is right or wrong, but what do I feel about it? You know, or do I feel anything about it? You know, have you, I'm just curious as the kind of discussions a person who is from a country that is being torn there, and they have at least their childhood formative years there, as you have, how do those people, what kind of arguments are they having even within themselves about their feelings? Or do they just sort of like just say, oh, it's not my problem, don't have to think about it, go away, you know?
Yeah, I do think that maybe that is just a front for a lot of people. And I can relate to a lot of the back and forth feelings that you have when you're from that country, but you don't really live there anymore, but you do, or you would want to visit. There's constantly that, like, if you almost think to yourself, if I really care what is going on in Ukraine, how can I live here and laugh, right, and have a good day? Like, that in itself seems like such a betrayal of what is going on in Ukraine. So I think there's a lot of struggle there. You almost feel like, if I can't completely live as miserable and as scared as Ukrainian people are right now, then maybe I should just say I don't care and just move on. But finding that middle ground of, I need to live my life here, right? I need to, but I also need to care about what's going on. And me smiling and me still having a good day doesn't mean I forgot about what is really going on in Ukraine. Doesn't mean I don't care.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to wake up in the morning and be functional. Mm-hmm. And if you're miserable and depressed every day, you're not going to be very functional. Mm-hmm. But then there's the other side, is if I feel good, I feel bad about feeling good. You know? Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end of our program, Alla, and I want to thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm hoping that our other panelists here have learned something useful for you and from you. And I'm hoping also that there is something that we can do. Is there a contact that you can give us in the chat? That can you type that in the chat, and then people, if you can copy it, or is there a contact people you can tell them that they can, you know, help Ukraine?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would say the one organization that we found that helps in a variety of different ways is organization called Razom, which is a Ukrainian word for together. I'm going to spell it. It's RAZOM. And if you go to their website, you'll find different ways to help, anything from donating to volunteering, to even coming out and supporting Ukraine by just being out with a flag or out in the community. And the money that they raise, they spend on anything from medical supplies to ammunition and, like I said, hard hats and bulletproof vests for the Army. But they also spend it on humanitarian help for both refugees and people that are still in Ukraine. So it feels like it's one organization, but it affects everyone in a lot of different ways. And in the chat, I can share my email as well. So that way, if anyone has any questions or ideas, let me know.
It's razumforukraine.org.
Yes.
And go, if you can grab that right out of, copy and paste it, or write it down right out of the chat, because we're at the end of our time here now. So grab it quick, because we're on our way out of here. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Alla. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you around Sioux Falls, and maybe you can find some of those plastic things off your buildings that blew away after you find them.
No kidding.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming and sharing this space. I hope you'll come back next week, same time, same station. And unless you hear different from us, the same Zoom link. And sometimes that happens because sometimes we get strange people who show up. Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you all next week.